So today I want to talk about AI and how you can use AI to enhance your fly-through work, your creativity, and come up with some really interesting concepts that just wouldn't have been possible before. So firstly, just to talk about a few examples. Now, let's say you're doing an FPV fly-through and it's just not possible to do an entire space in one shot. So now you can leverage AI to actually make it look like a one shot, although it's actually done in two separate takes. So that's going from the first shot, merging it into the second shot and making it look like a continuous shot. It could be used to transition two different cameras. So let's say you're flying an FPV drone and then transitioning into an in-car shot with a GoPro, for instance, and then back into an FPV shot. So it can be used to do some really interesting creative shots that were really reserved for CGI teams before this. Or it could even be used to transition through windows or something like that. So if you've got a shoot where there is no kind of point of entry, you could use a transition through a building window, for instance. So there's lots of different things that you can do with AI to enhance your current workflow. So in this video, I'm going to break down how I would use AI to merge two different takes into one single continuous shot. And like I said, this is useful when you're not able to do a single continuous shot. That might be signal strength within the building, or it could be that you're working with stand-in actors and you need to be able to move them between scenes and a one shot just wouldn't be possible. So you can use AI as a really interesting tool to help you in these creative situations. So up until this point, when I've been filming a fly through and I've not been able to do a single continuous shot, I've essentially been ending the first shot the same way I'm going to start the second shot, and then using something like a speed ramp and motion blur to hide the transition and matching them as closely as I could. Now this hasn't been foolproof. You could still kind of see the transition if you were really looking for it, but most people couldn't. But this is a much better way to be able to do this. So now that we've got you locked in, let's jump into Premiere and I'll start showing you how you can do this yourself. Right, so I've imported the two clips I want to use into Premiere Pro. And this was a factory fly through I did in December, where essentially it was shot in lots of different sections because the place was 1 million square foot and there was lots of moving parts, there were lots of people involved, and doing a single continuous take just wasn't possible. But we wanted the illusion that it was a single continuous take. So this is a really great example for how this can work really well. So you'll see here we've got our first shot, flying down this conveyor belt line and then passing here. And then we've got this section here where we just fly straight and then that's the end of the section. So I'll just play that for you. And then that's the end of the shot. Then what we did is we started the next shot in the same way, essentially the same way we finished the first shot. Here we go, here's the start of the second shot. More or less the same. And then this moves into the second section. So essentially what we want to do is merge the end of this shot with the beginning of the next shot. And like I said, the way I was doing this previously was finding a cut point which matched as closely as possible, and then using a speed ramp and motion blur to make sure the cut was as unnoticeable as possible, which, like I said, worked pretty well. There are a couple of things you need to know when shooting this in order for it to work properly. Just like the speed ramps that I was using before, the shots need to be as similar as possible. So really what you need to do with this is fly in a straight line and try and match the height and angle of the previous shot in order to make this as seamless as possible. Try not to do it around corners or just generally making it difficult for yourself. The easiest way to do this is to fly as straight as possible. So what we need to do is find a good end point for the first clip, and what I've done is actually selected one here. We've got this green bin here on the left hand side where I think it's going to be the best place to do this. Now what we then need to do is look at the second clip and decide where we want that transition to end. So just looking at this, somewhere around here I think will work fine. And the other thing you want to take into consideration with this is you don't want too much movement around this transition point, because anything that wasn't there in the first clip that is in the second clip, the AI is going to try and generate that and it might end up looking a bit weird. So you need to try and keep it as clean as possible. So let's cut the clip here and we'll use that as our transition point. When we come to do this, we'll be able to select how long we want that clip to be. And actually that's quite important because we need to effectively tell the AI how long it's going to be between the first clip ending and the second clip starting, and it's going to fill in that gap. And we want it to try and keep it at the same speed without it being too fast or too slow. So actually, we'll need to work out how long we want this transition to be. So we'll just go, okay, that's 12 seconds. So we'll just take a look at here on the timeline to where the playhead is, roughly 12 seconds. And then if we just imagine that, let's keep going, keep going, keep going. And that's roughly where that next scene or that next part of the clip's going to start, or the second part of the clip is going to start, which is 18 seconds. So 12, yeah, so roughly 6 seconds is what we're looking at there, clip length wise. So it's important to know that, and I'll show you why in a minute. So what we're going to do now is we're going to export the first frame that we're going to use and put it into the AI, and the last frame. And then what we want the AI to do is essentially generate the transition between those two frames. So you'll see here, so I'll just get rid of this here. So we'll see here, this is the last frame that we're going to use. So in Premiere, you've got this export frame control here. So we'll simply name this first frame. And then that can be exported as a JPEG, downloads is fine, or wherever you want to put that into, and then just click OK. So that's now exported that first frame. And then what we'll do is export, or we'll go to this next frame. Here we go. So this is the next frame, or this is the second frame that we're going to use. So again, click the export button. We'll name that second frame and then export that. I'll explain this why properly in a minute, and you'll see this as we go through the process. But the important thing here is don't color your clips at the moment. So you'll notice with these clips, these are still just D-Log M. I haven't colored them. I haven't touched them in any way. And the reason you want to do this is because Kling will actually add a subtle contrast into the video that it generates. So you want to try and leave these as raw as possible. Now that we've exported our two clips, we're going to jump into the AI tool and start having a look at the prompts we need to use in order to make this transition work. So for this, I'm using Kling 3.0, and I'm using Kling in its standalone form. Now this can be accessed through Artlist and other third-party providers, but actually I feel like you get your best bang for your buck when it comes to using this in its standalone form. You'll need to have a subscription or buy credits in order to use this, as generating video clips will cost credits, although I don't think it's really that expensive, but having a subscription is probably the easiest way to do this. So you'll see now we're in the video generation tool. I've got Kling 3.0 selected. Now I was using Kling 2.5, and sometimes you might need to switch between the two depending on the results. Kling 3.0 can be a little bit hit and miss sometimes, but look, we'll give it a go in here and see what results we get, but generally it works pretty well. So the first thing you'll want to do in here is click Add Start and End Frames. So you'll go to wherever you put those files, and we'll click on the first frame and add that first. Wait for that to load, and then we'll click on add an end frame. We'll select the second frame and then again import that. So now this is probably the most important part, is the prompt that we're going to use to be able to do this. As you can see, I have done this before, but I'm going to take the prompt that I used previously because I've refined this over time and it seems to work pretty well. Now what I'll do is I'll put this prompt in the description, as well as a link to the files that you can download for yourself, so you can follow along while I'm doing this. So we'll take a look at the prompt. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it into here. So what I'm telling it to do, and I've worked on this again for quite a long time, and you'll have to fiddle with the prompt in order to make this really work. We're asking it to create a seamless FPV style camera transition between two consecutive moments of the same FPV drone fly through inside an industrial warehouse. The camera continues flying forward with natural FPV momentum, subtle pitch and minor roll correction as if flown by an experienced FPV pilot. Movement should feel confident and continuous, not slow, floaty or cinematic. Maintain a straightforward flight path through the aisle, aligning perfectly with the second image. No cuts, no pauses, no speed ramps, no zooms. Do not alter any geometry, layout, objects, or lighting. Do not color grade or adjust exposure. Colors and tone must remain unchanged. The final frame must match the second image exactly in position, height, angle, and framing, as if the FPV drone simply kept flying forward in real life. Now you'll obviously notice I've put in some information around don't change colors, etc., etc. Now a current limitation of Kling or any other AI that I have tried using is it will add subtle contrast to the clip. So we'll need to color grade that out when it comes to going back into your editing software. So like you'll see with this prompt, you have to be quite clear as to what you want to get out of it, and describing the motion you want and making sure that we're not adding things to the scene that weren't necessarily there before are quite important. So I would use this prompt as a really good baseline and just change it for whatever scene that you might be trying to use. Essentially, this is going to export a 1080p clip, which we'll need to upscale later in the video. So do you remember when we spoke about the length of the video? Again, this is a really important part, because what we want it to do is not try and slow down or speed up to try and get to that end frame either quicker or slower than we think it needs to. So for this example, we roughly calculated it was going to be about 6 seconds for this clip. So I'll move this over to 6 seconds, which I think is roughly the right amount of time for this clip. Now you can choose a number of outputs. I am just going to do one for this, because obviously if you choose more outputs, it is going to use more credits. And you will have to hone this and kind of do this 3 or 4 times to get it completely right. So you want to just generate one clip at a time, review it, and then make amendments if you need to that prompt. Great, so we've got our 2 clips, we've got our prompt, we've told it how long we want the video to be, and now we're going to click generate. Right, so now that we've submitted that clip, it can take a little while for this to do it, depending on how many people are on the network trying to do this all at the same time. So for instance, here it says, you are on a queue, estimated wait time is 6 minutes. So we'll come back in a moment once this is finished generating and have a quick look and see what the results are. So this is my first time watching back this particular generation, so fingers crossed we haven't got to do them more than once. I mean, that looks pretty much spot on, if I'm honest. I think that looks absolutely fine. So you will notice things like, and you probably won't be able to see this on the screen record, but you will notice with this, you'll get some sort of, you get little bits of warping around the side and things where they don't look quite right. So I think the AI gets a little bit confused with the motion blur, but actually I think that helps us in the end, where it's a bit more seamless, because what you don't want is for it to be, you know, to look like there's no motion blur, because then it'll be quite obvious. So I'll also show you how it really doesn't matter, because we're going to speed this bit up a little bit and add a bit of motion blur ourselves, just to try and make it as cohesive as possible. So what you need to do is then download this. I just do it in MP4 and without the watermark, and you will need the subscription in order to be able to do it without the watermark. So we'll click download. So now you've got that export, what we'll need to do is upscale it, because like I said, it will only kick out a 1080p version of this clip. And of course, most of the time you'll be working in 4K, so we need to upscale from 1080p into 4K in order for this to work. Right, so once you've downloaded that clip, we'll need to open up Topaz, and then we need to import the clip. So just go to wherever you save the clip. There it is, the Kling clip. You'll then be asked, how do you want to edit? Just click on 4K for this. So once you've got the clip imported, this is actually very simple. So just select presets, 4K, and then you've already got the clip in here. So all we need to do is press export. You'll be given some options here, so you can change the file name. So we'll call this Kling Upscale. Call it whatever you want. We'll go to the original folder where we want this to end up in. So for instance, it's in here. So we'll just select folder. And then the codec, so we want this to be H.264. Profile, have that set to high. I've got 2 different GPUs, so we'll select my standalone GPU, which is my 5070. Bitrate, so I will put this on constant and then select the highest option, which is 180 megabits. Audio mode, doesn't matter, just press none. Container, you can have this MOV, MKV or MV4, which I just do, and we don't want to apply LUT, so then we just need to select start export, and we'll need to wait for this to export, which will only take a couple of minutes or so. Right, so now that export's completed, you can close down Kling, and we'll jump back into Premiere or whatever software that you're using. So now we will just import the clip, select open, and we've now imported that, and we can now stick that into our clip here. Right, so we've now imported that into Premiere. So this is where the tricky part is. So we now need to match it back to the clips that we originally used to export those first frames. Here we go, we'll drop that in. And now we need to essentially just match these. So the first one should be fairly straightforward. So we'll just move that end clip over. So as you mentioned, this is the first clip where we use the last frame of this to generate that first frame. So this should technically, match fairly well. So you'll now see here, and this is what I was talking about with this color shift. So you'll see Kling has actually added a bunch of contrast to this clip, but it's used that first clip, and that first clip is exactly the same. So that's good. That's a good result. So like I said, I'll show you how you can color grade this out and match them as closely as possible. And it does take a little bit of trial and error, so you have to be patient. So what you will notice is that if we just skip back a couple of frames, so you'll see when it changes, we've got a couple of frames there where it doesn't move. So what we'll need to do is just zoom into the timeline here, go to where the clip actually starts to change. So for instance, I think it's 1, 2, 3 frames. We'll cut it there, and then we'll just pull that back. And then what we should have is, you'll notice the color change, but it keeps moving forward at the same pace roughly. So then we need to match the end of this clip. Now, like I said, the first and last frame should be exactly the same. So it should just be a straight swap in and straight swap out. And you'll notice what I did is where I exported those frames, I actually cut the clip so I knew exactly where they were. So you haven't got to faff around with trying to join them up. So they should just match almost exactly the same. There we go. And again, you'll notice there's that color shift again. And like I said, we'll just change that out. And again, with here, you'll notice there's a little 1 frame where, or 2 frames where it stops moving. So we'll just need to go to there, zoom in, and just again, just cut those couple of frames out, and then just double check it, make sure it doesn't jump. That's pretty seamless. And all you should be able to see there is just a color shift. So I'll play that for you from the first through that Kling generated clip and then to the end clip, just to see how the flow works, and then we'll look at how we can change those colors to make it more seamless. So I'll give that a play. Now we're into the AI generated clip, and then we're into the real clip again. Pretty seamless. I think that's worked pretty well. There's a couple of things you can do just to enhance this. So the first thing we need to sort out is this color change. So you'll notice between these two, there's kind of like a consistent contrast change here, which we'll need to color grade out. So my suggestion with this is to actually color grade out the contrast from the Kling clip rather than changing the other clips around it. And this is why I said it's important to not put any color grade on those original clips, because we'll need to fix this essentially. So we'll go to our Kling clip, and then we just need to flick back and forth to try and get them to match as quickly as possible. So the first thing I'll generally do is just back the contrast out from the Kling clip, and look, already that's much better. Now you can see there is still a slight change, so it's really just about figuring out what's changed here. So my clip looks actually a bit brighter than the Kling clip, so we'll probably just increase the brightness slightly, or sorry, the exposure. Let's start with like 0.2, and again, just flick between the two. There we go, much better already. And then there we go. I now can't really see the difference between those. That's worked pretty well. There we go. And then we should have the end of the clip should match again. Perfect. I now can't see, without really looking for it, the color shift there. So that's actually worked quite well. Now in some instances you might need to color shift a little bit and play with a bit more in the highlights or the shadows. But in this example, actually, where it's quite a plain looking warehouse or factory, there's not loads of color in it anyway, so that kind of helps out. But yeah, I just think backing that contrast off and just adding a little bit of exposure, it's now almost impossible to see where that transition has happened. Great, so that's actually a really good result, and I'm really happy with that, and that's actually worked out a lot better than the first time I did it, so that's really interesting. I think with this AI stuff is it's really going to improve as we go along, so we're still very much in the early stages of being able to do this, and as things progress it'll naturally become better and better, so this is a really good point at the moment to get into this. So really you could just leave it like that and be done, but like I said, there is a few things in this clip that you can notice especially in, you know, writing up here or in the middle here. The writing might get a bit funky, or you might get a bit of warping in the sides and just sort of some artifacts. So to make this truly seamless, what I'm actually going to do, so I would like to just normally nest this, but there's a weird thing in Premiere Pro where if you nest a clip and then speed ramp it, you end up with like a blackout on the screen. So what I'll do, and this isn't really best practice, but this is just the way I get around it. So I'll take those 3 clips, we'll export those. This will probably be different in whatever. So we'll export those in highest quality and try and make them as lossless as possible. We'll go source in and out. Ren AI export. Wait for that to export, and then we'll bring it back into Premiere Pro, and we'll be able to speed ramp it and add some motion blur, which is really just the final touch to selling this illusion, let's say. Shove that onto the timeline, again over those clips. Now you want to try and not break the process as much as possible, so I would just leave these 3 clips in here. If you need to go back in and make any changes, that's always a good idea. Click on the little FX button, go to time remapping, speed. We'll choose where we want our first keyframe to be, so we'll just hold Control and click on that. That'll give us our first keyframe, and then we'll give it the speed ramp. Where we want the end keyframe and the speed ramp to finish, we'll go on here and we'll just say, let's put that up to, I don't know, 300% is always a good starting point. And then we'll just zoom into the clip. I'm used to doing this on a much bigger screen. And then we'll just add our ramps, smooth those out a little bit. We'll give that a play and see how it looks. And it just speeds it up a little bit, kind of hides that transition, and that looks absolutely seamless. And then all we need to do is just bring the rest of that clip, and then what I might do is just color these so that I know exactly what they are on the timeline. So let's go with label, and we'll do yellow, just so we know that those are the clips that we used to generate this with, and this is the one we exported. So now I think that's worked pretty well without any motion blur, but I do like to just add an adjustment layer just to, again, just hide any artifacts there might be. For instance, so if I just zoom in and we'll go to where the start of that ramp is and then the end, we'll just put adjustment layer on there. And then we'll go to effects. I use Real Smart Motion Blur for my motion blur. So Real Smart Motion Blur Pro, drag that onto the adjustment layer. We'll just go sequence, render entire work area, let that render out quickly. And then that should be pretty much it in terms of this particular clip. Right, so now that's finished rendering, we'll take a look, and that should, again, really, it's just to sell the illusion, adding the speed ramp and the motion blur. It's to hide anything that, you know, might put the viewer off or might stand out, obviously. So we'll play that, and then we shouldn't really be able to see where it sort of starts and ends. Almost perfect. There we go. So that's actually worked really, really well. I'm happy with that. That's probably the best one I've ever done, to be fair. So as you can see, that's just a really interesting way to try and join clips up where it's not quite been possible to do a fly through in one single take. And like I said previously, I was doing this using speed ramps and motion blur in much the same way, finishing that first clip in the way that you're going to start the second clip. And I was doing that in very much the same way to transition between those 2 different shots. And so really with this, we're just using AI to merge those 2 clips together. And yeah, like I said, there's lots of different uses for this and ways that you can expand your creativity and flying through windows or changing between cameras. And again, I will have shown a few of examples of that in this video. I hope you found this tutorial useful. Please feel free to ask me any questions in the comments. And if you did find this video useful, please hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching.